The iPhone 3GS replaced the iPhone 3G back in 2009 and brought some key changes, more RAM and video recording being the highlights. Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and this is the iPhone 3GS, a 10-year-old device. So today we're going to be trying to use it and see how it performs 10 years later. The iPhone 3GS was a phone. A pretty good phone. No longer a good phone by modern standards, but at the time, it was pretty good. I suppose I could end things there, but if you clicked this video, you probably want a little bit more than that, so let's start with the design. The 3GS has a plastic back and stainless steel frame. It's kind of an odd combination, and one Apple never went back to. It also comes in either white or black. The plastic feels premium enough, but it's still plastic, so there's always going to be the connotation of cheapness. But to be fair here, this phone was from 2009, and back then you'd be hard-pressed to find a phone that wasn't made of plastic. The phone's back is curved, which makes it actually quite comfortable to hold, and also gives it the illusion of being a little bit thinner than it actually is. The phone is really nice in the hand, but the plastic isn't exactly of the highest quality, and has the tendency to chip, scratch, and even crack. Cracks were always worse around the charging port. As you can see, mine has one there. And that's not necessarily the phone's fault completely. It kind of is. It wasn't the best materials ever, but the phone is 10 years old, and so it's hard to put all of the blame on it. Plus, if you find one that's pretty much brand new, it does look really nice. In fact, it kind of reminds me of the jet black iPhone 7. It's just very, very premium looking, even if it is plastic. The phone is fairly hefty, but again, 10 years old, so I'll give it a pass here. The design in general isn't exactly premium by modern standards, but it is unique. Apple has the tendency to eventually recycle designs, but the 3GS has never gotten a reboot unless you include the iPhone 5C. For example, the iPhone 4's general design was brought back with the iPhone 10. Aluminum, like on the first iPhone, was also brought back to the iPhone 5, and next year's iPhone apparently is going to be even more like the iPhone 4, being more squarish, so this might make the 3GS look worse in comparison because no other phone has gone back to this design at all, but it also makes it stand out, and I quite like it. The design ages the 3GS, but what really ages it is the display. It isn't Retina and has a size of only 3.5 inches like the iPhone 4, but the resolution is only 320 by 480, equating to a pixel density of 165 pixels per inch. This is not a good display. Not only is it fairly inset into the screen, but you can see pixels. Everything looks a little bit blurry, especially text, and the experience on this compared to the iPhone 4 doesn't even come close. This doesn't necessarily make me dislike the 3GS. For the time, this screen was pretty average, if not better than most of the competition. It just shows the age and gives me a much better appreciation for the iPhone 4. It's also worth mentioning that the 3GS has a significant blue tint to the screen. You can especially see it when it's turning on the screen. If you turn it off axes, it's really, really blue. I'm not sure why that is particularly. I'm guessing it's just because of the older LCD display. To say the iPhone 4 screen was a big upgrade is like saying that the invention of the wheel was probably a good thing. It was a massive step forward, and there is no exaggeration there whatsoever. Turning to the battery, this phone has 1,220 milliamp hours, which doesn't sound too good, but actually isn't that bad, especially when you consider how underpowered this phone is, which means that it doesn't need as much power. I can't speak to how good the battery performs on like a daily driver type basis, but back in the day, I think it was pretty solid, and on iOS 6, for me at least, it's done pretty well. Camera-wise, the iPhone 3GS wrecked the competition back in 2009, but not so much now in 2019. But hey, it tries its best. It has an upgraded 3 megapixel camera and the ability to record video in up to 480p. That's some VGA quality right there, crazy stuff. This was the first iPhone that could actually record video, so that's a pretty amazing addition. You can see some video here. It doesn't look good, but if I had to say something positive, it at least does have that vintage type feel to it that's since long been lost in the waves of of time, probably for the better. When it comes to photos, well, they won't beat the iPhone 11 Pro. It also doesn't have HDR, which definitely hurts it, but in outdoor lighting conditions, you can at least capture the moment and mostly be able to understand what's happening in the frame. As you can see here, it again has that vintage retro feel to it, which has its own charm, but not something you would want with 2020 being right around the corner. Here's a couple comparisons between it and the iPhone 11 Pro. Now, I'm not going to say that the 3GS doesn't hold its own, but the iPhone 11 Pro is at least slightly better. But hey, again, at least the iPhone 3GS tries its best. There is no front-facing camera, as that wasn't introduced until the iPhone 4, so if you want to take selfies, you'd have to do it the old-fashioned way, by holding up the phone towards you and hoping that you actually get a good picture. Spoiler, you probably won't. Back in my day, you had to work for your selfies. Kids these days have it so darn easy. The 3GS was a significant upgrade over the 3G when it came to processing speeds. It had a 600 MHz processor and a full 256 megabytes of RAM. That's a lot of bytes, and like 512 million nibbles. When it comes to speeds, anything intensive like internet browsing is pretty obviously not going to be exactly a pleasant experience on the 3GS. But when it comes to other stuff like the operating system itself, you might be pleasantly surprised. The iPhone 3GS can run up to iOS 6.1.6, and it does pretty well, with most tasks feeling snappy and quick. Opening apps and just basic navigation is fast, unlike some newer iPhones like the 4 and 4S on their latest versions. This is thanks to the brilliant optimization of iOS 6, the last iOS iteration of the Steve Jobs era, and one I would consider to be pretty cool. There is a ton of jailbreaking and downgrading potential with the iPhone 3GS, if that's something you want to mess with, and I believe if you get lucky and get a early model of the 3GS, there's actually a lot more you can do with it. Unfortunately, I have a later one, but you can still do some stuff like jailbreak or downgrade to iOS 4.1, and there's probably other stuff now too. I haven't really paid attention to the community in a while. But is the iPhone 3GS usable anymore? It's 10 years old, so you would expect the answer to be no, but the truth is, it kind of is. When it comes to modern apps, either they seem to kind of work or they don't work at all. YouTube, for example, would not open and told me that I needed an update, despite the fact that I literally couldn't update it. I couldn't even download Twitter at all for some reason. It kept saying that it was incompatible with this iPhone. But on the other hand, I did get Instagram working, which was kind of cool, although I could not see stories and the pictures were cut off. But still, some things here and there will work, and of course, older apps like older games will work just fine. But when it comes to iMessage and SMS and calling, you know, things you have a phone for, the 3GS works. And so is a phone for the extreme basics. It's not the worst, but you should never buy it or use it anymore because there's really no point. Sure, it's cheap, you can find one for under 20 bucks pretty easily on eBay, but I wouldn't do that unless you want to collect one for whatever reason. I suppose if you got a 32GB model and used it as an iPod, that would not be horrible at all, but beyond that I'd take a hard pass here. There's just no reason to get one. I mean, an iPhone 5S can be found for like 40 bucks and an SE can be found for like 80 bucks, so why would you ever buy a 3GS if you wanted it for practical reasons? But I doubt any of you came into this video wondering if you should get a 3GS for practical reasons, so I'm sure none of you are too surprised with that answer. The iPhone 3GS is really cool, but it's 10 years old. Sure, it can pass for some of the most basic tasks out there like texting and calling, but so can a flip phone. The iPhone 3GS is an interesting device in that it was the last one before the huge bomb that was the iPhone 4, and it actually did a lot right. Yeah, the screen quality wasn't good, but it was about right for the time. The speeds and camera were a big, huge upgrade over the iPhone 3G. It was supported for a full 2 versions more than the iPhone 3G, which got stuck on iOS 4. The only other phone to get 2 more versions over another iPhone was the iPhone 5S, which got to iOS 12 while the 5 got iOS 10. That's not something to scoff at. The iPhone 3GS was a great phone. It was just completely overshadowed by the innovation that came with the iPhone 4, and that's why no one ever really talks about it. But the fact that I have really not a lot bad to say about this phone is pretty great in and of itself. Both the iPhone 3G and the first iPhone felt very slow on their last versions of iOS, but the 3GS was able to beat that trend and feel fast on iOS 6, which is not a feat you should understate. It's way too common for iPhones to get slow on their last versions. This was not one of them. I really like the iPhone 3GS. It is a significant part of Apple's past, even if nobody remembers it. And with that, I think I'm pretty much done here. Did you ever have an iPhone 3GS? I sure didn't until I picked this one up. a couple years ago? Let me know your thoughts on the 3GS in the comments below. If you found this video interesting, maybe hit that like button and consider subscribing for more content just like this. You can follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, maybe at 91_tech if you want to for some reason. I'm very quirky and unique, and so on Twitter my user handle there has a pumpkin in it instead of the O in Josh, so I'm really creative that way because it's October when I posted this video if you're watching it later. You know what, just go follow me. That's it, that's all I'm trying to say. And with that all being said, I'm Josh from 91tech, and I will see you all next time.